when Mrs. Silas shook her head, he stood from his chair. He needed to move, to think. Hugh didn't want to offend Lady Rebecca, but even more so, he didn't need to anger his last connection to his former life at Bow Street. After he'd been foisted from his role as principal officer and given instead the mantle of Viscount Neatham, Sir Gabriel had continued to involve him in several cases. However, after a handful of months last autumn, when Hugh had become somewhat of a distracted wastrel, Sir Gabriel had ceased approaching him. It had been all Hugh's own doing. When the Dowager Duchess of Fornia, Audrey Sinclair, had gone to the continent to spend the bulk of her required mourning period travelling, her letters to Hugh, and his to her, had been intercepted and collected by another private inquiry agent, one who had been hired to follow Audrey. In waylaying their correspondence, the inquiry agent had caused them both a great deal of confusion and hurt, each of them worrying that the other had fallen out of love. Hugh had not handled it well, and Sir Gabriel had not overlooked his shoddy performance. However, after the events in January, in which he'd been beckoned to the port of Dover to help lift Audrey from suspicion of murder, everything had settled again. He was no longer in any doubt of her love for him, and he'd made sure that she was confident in his. For the last few months in London, he'd taken every opportunity, few though they'd been, to get her alone and remind her of it. He came to a stop in front of a window that overlooked Bedford Street. It wasn't a street devoted to fine residences befitting a lord, but to a mix of businesses and middle-class homes. As such, the arrival of the lady seated at his desk would have gone unnoticed by fashionable society. "My husband would be quite cross if he knew we'd come to see you," Mrs. Silas admitted. "He would prefer to keep Bethany's absence hushed up." "Only because Caro's husband is convinced that she has run off with this cad, this Mr. Comstock," Lady Rebecca put in. "And he cares more for a pristine reputation in Parliament than he does for his own daughter." "Now, sister, that isn't true." But Mrs. Silas winced and added more softly, "Not entirely." Hugh had met John Silas once. He was with the House of Commons and Hugh the House of Lords. Still, he knew the man was a serious, well-respected member of the Tories. To have rumours swirling about that his daughter had ruined herself would be detrimental to his standing, and Silas did not have a title to fall back onto. "Tell me about this Mr. Comstock," Hugh said, giving in to his curiosity. Mrs. Silas beat her fan faster. "He is the most disgraceful of blackguards." "What leads you to say that?" Hugh would take her opinion with a liberal grain of salt, if only because not very long ago he too had been branded as a blackguard. His half-brother, Bartholomew, had perpetuated a lie that had brought Hugh and his half-sister Eloisa to utter ruination. For years the beau monde in London had believed Hugh had sullied his own half-sister, and his brother had happily allowed that lie to stand firm. Barty had wanted to cover up the truth that his other brother, Thomas, was the degenerate abuser, not Hugh. The scandal had come out just over a year ago, and even with Barty's disgrace and disappearance from society, the Neatham title still suffered a black mark that would not easily scrub out. Hugh was loath to sully another man's reputation without proof. However, Mrs. Silas's lips gaped in offence at his question. "I am led to say that because the man took my Bethany 1 week ago and never returned her." The choice of wording set him ill at ease, as if Bethany were an object, and Mr. Comstock had broken into the Silas household and stolen her. Lady Rebecca patted her sister's arm, then more calmly said, "He is a mystery to us, Lord Neatham. Bethany made his acquaintance at Vauxhall."